when we believe and perceive that someone is in authority, we stop our critical thinking. Okay, we basically recognize that someone can help us make the right decision. We don't have to think anymore. So if you as a salesperson can demonstrate to your customer that you know all about their issues, you've seen them before, you know how to solve their problems, you know everything there is to know about your product, including its drawbacks, present yourself as an authority figure, you're basically doing all that critical thinking for your customer, and they're more likely to accept your recommendations.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Martin John. Martin is a freelance management trainer who specializes in negotiation and ethical influence. So, Martin, first up, welcome.
Thank you very much, Fred. Nice to be back. I'm a returning guest. Unbelievably happy back. So happy.
Yeah, it's a select club, sir. It's a select club. And you know exactly why. Well, apart from it always being a pleasure talking to you.
Naturally.
I saw this ethical influence thing and thought, ooh, hello.
Piqued your interest, eh?
Very much kind of something I'm interested in, and something that you've put a lot of time and effort and really kind of nailing your colours to the mast on this, aren't you? So tell us a bit more about it.
Totally right, Fred. It is directly linked actually to your project and what you're doing. So I came across a guy called Dr. Robert Cialdini several years ago now. So he wrote this groundbreaking book called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. And he basically, through decades of scientific research, he came up with 7 universal principles of persuasion, which I'm sure we'll talk about as the call goes on. And I became very interested in this and followed his work, got really into behavioral science. I've never been exposed to it prior to a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago. Found it utterly fascinating. Anyway, Dr. Cialdini, he wants to continue his legacy. And he wants to reach as many people as possible with his ethical influencing principles. So last June, he set up the Cialdini Institute. And I was very fortunate enough to become a founding member of that. And now I'm a certified ethical influence practitioner. And not only that, I'm a certified coach. So I coach and teach his ethical influence principles. And they're not just relevant for, as you know, my technical background is procurement, but ethical influence is everywhere, particularly relevant to sales, marketing, HR, anywhere, and also procurement as well, because actually procurement are human beings as well, Fred, as we've discussed in the past.
Well,
So they're susceptible.
You keep telling me this.
One day you'll believe it. But my point is that because we're human beings, we're all susceptible to these influence principles because they're deeply they're in our psyche. It's not something you can consciously turn off. It's embedded within us, and that's the beauty and the magic of them.
Yeah, and so the ethical influence are related back to those original 7 from the
the
first book.
So the principles of the pillars of the Cialdini Institute are ethics, science, and application. Okay, because it's great having a lot of principles, but if they're not used ethically, it's really pretty bad for all protagonists. Yeah, they're backed in science, so that means they're not based on hunches or the latest fads or trends from management consultants. And then application, it's great knowing the science, but it's all about how you apply them in your day-to-day working life and also in your life outside of work. So those three pillars are key.
Yeah, because I've read the book. I think it was first written in the 70s or certainly early
84.
80s.
It's the 40th anniversary this year.
Oh wow, yeah, okay. And he even calls out in the book how some of these things they can be used quite negatively, quite maliciously. I think the story I remember is consistency and commitment. That as humans, we want to be consistent. If we say we're going to do something, we're going to do something. And he talks about how the toy industry absolutely use this
That's the example
to
from the book. Yeah,
throttle, yeah, is it throttle supply so that like, they build up this big, yeah, this is a must-have thing at this Christmas, and the parents all say to the kids they're going to have this thing, and of course they aren't there. So they spend more money on toys to make up for it. But then, of course, there's a whole load of supply after Christmas, so
after
they buy the
Christmas.
toy anyway.
Yeah,
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 yeah. So that would be on the unethical side for me.
yeah,
Our
me too.
industry has made billions for it. But there's a and great recall from the book, by the way, of that example. There's a 3-point test to whether you're using the principles ethically or not. Okay, so firstly, is what you're saying to your prospect or whoever it is you're trying to persuade, is it true? You know, is it factually correct what you're saying? You know, it's not some kind of contrived thing that you just made up. Is it wise for both parties to do as you're asking? Is there a net benefit for both parties? And then the third ethical test is the principle naturally occurring? So in your example of a shortage of toys before Christmas, there's contrived scarcity. So that to me would fail the one of the 3 points on the ethical test. So there will always be people who are prepared to stretch ethics and even abuse ethics. But we have to, if you're playing the long game and building long-term sustainable relationships with your customers, your suppliers, your internal colleagues, even your family, then surely behaving ethically is the only answer.
Oh, right. So scarcity was the one that immediately came to mind when is it true? I mean, people will create deliberate scarcity, won't they? The other one, then, the naturally occurring one,
Yeah.
authority is one of the principles, I think. Am I right?
Authorities, yeah, correct.
Yeah. And is the example he talks in the book about where they do that test, the psychologists do this test with the putting electrocuting people basically,
Yes.
and but I know I'm explaining it really badly, but administering electric shocks where they were told to carry on administering, where they stopped if it was just a normal person, but they dressed somebody as a doctor who said, no, no, it's fine, even though it's going past danger. And of course, this authoritative figure said it was easier to influence people. But am I
Exactly.
about right on there?
No, exactly right. For the benefit of the viewers, Fred has got some great recall there. So there's an experiment conducted by a guy called Stanley Milgram in the might have been in the 50s. So basically, they recruited a load of volunteers, and they had an actor at the other side of the divide that was hooked up to this device that gave them the electric shocks. And the volunteers were basically told by this authority figure they never met before, was in a white coat, presented himself as someone in authority, continue administering the electric shocks, even though the volunteers knew that the dosage of volts that they were going up to would make the participant pass out in some cases, and in the extreme cases would even die. They continued to administer those electric shocks. So that's the power of authority when it's misused.
Yeah, because I think so visually. I've got this image in my head of this actor behind this screen. Stop
It
it!
was exactly. I'll see if I can show you the video. No, it's fantastic. They're really
Um,
screaming and hollering, but in a good way. There's an alternative I can share with you here. So this was just to demonstrate the power of authority. So some volunteers were brought in, and they were discussing their finances. And the chat was about, what would happen if you or your partner was ill and couldn't earn anymore, or you were made redundant, you're out of work, and you couldn't pay your mortgage. How bad would that affect you and your life? And they were thinking about this. Then they were introduced to some person who was presented and introduced as a financial expert who had won numerous awards with his financial recommendations. What they call financial advisor. Now they hooked these people up to brain imagery devices, and they measured the impact of this authority figure coming into the room. So they hooked them up before when they were given all these concerns to worry about. How would their financial circumstances change? How would they pay their bills if they weren't able to work? Brain was, going really triggered, lots of activity in the brain. When the authority figure came in, the person that was presented as a financial expert, brain activity just flatlined, just went all quiet. So the point of all this is when we believe and perceive that someone is in authority, we stop our critical thinking. Okay. We basically recognize that someone can help us make the right decision. We don't have to think anymore. So if you as a salesperson can demonstrate to your customer that you know all about their issues, you've seen them before, you know how to solve their problems, you know everything there is to know about your product, including its drawbacks, present yourself as an authority figure, you're basically doing all that critical thinking for your customer, and they're more likely to accept your recommendations.
Yeah. So I'm looking back at these things that I scribbled down, which is true, wise to do, and naturally occurring.
Yeah.
If somebody is then positioning themselves as that, so they are putting, we were talking about LinkedIn before we hit record, yeah. So we're putting valuable stuff out on LinkedIn, showing that they know the customer, they know the world. You know, they're creating reports, they've got stuff surrounding them, which demonstrates that they are genuinely an expert in that customer's world. That's ethical then. That's legit, isn't it? If they really do know, and all they're doing is just letting people know that they know. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, totally legitimate. I think in the UK we struggle with demonstrating or publicizing our qualifications or credentials. But certainly, you know, these are things that we've achieved and have put us in this place of authority, which our customers would benefit from.
That's interesting. I think you're right. I was telling you before, wasn't I? I did some training about how to position myself and how to deliver a social pitch. And there's a kind of very specific way to do this. And I had to practice it so much because it felt unnatural to show off. Of course, it wasn't. It's just letting people know that, hey, you know this stuff, so tell them, otherwise they're not going to know.
It's relevant. So one of the things that the Cialdini Institute recommends is, say, if you're in a meeting with your colleagues and a customer, is to and you've not met before, is to get someone else to introduce you and to highlight your credentials, because then that avoids you coming across as some ego-fueled maniac.
Yeah. Interesting. However, so I'm thinking about this because I'm just relating this back to stuff I'm seeing. So in some ways, you're not doing your job right if you're not letting people know that you are an expert and you can help them and you can calm them and you can help them sort this stuff out. On the other hand, people who are faking it, in other words, ChatGPT tells them something, so they just throw that straight out. They don't really understand what they were told, and then they're rocking up to meetings and they actually haven't got a clue. It's almost like under false pretenses. I mean, it's going to end in tears anyway, but that wouldn't be passing our test, would it?
No, it wouldn't. It would. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend. It only takes, you know, 1 or 2 levels of questioning before, you know, your prospect or whomever would just expose you, and then, you know, any credibility that you had at the start of the meeting will be completely shot.
So use the tools to build the expertise.
Yeah, but legitimately,
and then you now have legitimate expertise that you can talk about rather than shortcut. Oh, I can pretend I know this because that looks as though it might make sense. I don't know because I don't really understand it. Put it out there. No, just
I mean,
do the job right.
You could trick people and hoodwink them in the short term, but it's going to be, you're going to get caught out in the long term. And, you know, would that customer want to buy from you again if they know that, you know, they've been deceived? Unlikely.
Okay, so we've got these. So in the institute, then we've got these guide rails, I suppose. Those three.
Yep.
What did you call them?
The
3 pillars: true,
the
wise,
pillars.
to do, and yeah.
Ah, no. Okay, that's the pillars
test.
are science, application, and ethics,
Yep.
and then the ethical test is true, natural, and wise.
Okay, so and we have to understand those things before we can go into learning then how we can then use influence techniques to get better at influencing and communicating with people, because there are techniques which can be learned and can be applied deliberately.
They absolutely can be learned, and that's the beauty of this, is because maybe in the past persuasion and influence was thought of as an art that, you know, that only a few skilled people possessed, but because there's decades of scientific research now detailing each of the principles in action, you know, in most stringent scientific rigor, you know, you can easily now learn from them and learn how to apply them because of how those tests and the studies have been conducted. It's easy to take away from those translation into application.
Oh, okay. So when you first wrote the book, was he thinking these were more of an art or skill, and then has since gone in and really dug down and got into the science of it and said, "Hey, look, yeah, we can actually do brain scans and all sorts and tests."
It's a bit of both. So there was already like 40 years of scientific research before he wrote the book, and then of course that's expanded since. There's new studies all the time. But he immersed himself in. He actually went undercover to attend these sales trainings. He went into military recruitment. He went into, like telesales stuff. So he went into all these different areas of business to just understand, what these people were doing, how, just how were they becoming so successful at selling, what principles were they using. And that's how he distilled them then into these 7. Well, 6
Yeah.
to begin with, and he added another one, Unity, in 2015.
Oh, what's Unity? I didn't.
Unity is we tend to say yes to people who are of us. They're part of the same tribe.
Okay. Yeah.
So that could be, it could be anything. It could be like a sports team. It could be a choir. It could be some community thing. It could be from the city. You're born in the same town. You go to the same church, perhaps, or anything that brings some cohesion together.
Okay. So that's why some people will set up a community because they genuinely want members to prosper, or because they're easier to influence.
Well,
That's a cult, isn't
it? That's like a cult.
Just
Actually,
found a
do
cult.
you remember that? Do you remember from the book the story of the cult and the Kool-Aid, the poisoned Kool-Aid?
Oh, I can't. God, tell us.
It's
Tell us
called,
it.
I can't remember the detail, but everybody completely fell in love with this founder. I can't remember his name now. He took them to a camp in South America, and ultimately ended with mass death, with everyone voluntarily drinking this poisoned Kool-Aid.
Yeah. I
Extraordinary.
can't. I'll try and find a link and put
Yeah,
it
it's in the
in the
book.
notes. But it's interesting because again, even those things they can be modelled and used for good or bad.
Yeah.
I actually did read a book on how to start a cult. No, not because I was going to start a cult, because I
On
know
the
the guy
dark
who
web
wrote
or
it.
something.
Well, no, I know the guy who wrote it, and what he was doing is basically modelling some of the cult leader behaviours, which actually, if you do to lead a community,
Yeah.
you can do it way more effectively.
Yeah.
So it's having a common enemy and throwing stones at them and sort of
Incredibly
making it
charismatic,
harder. Yeah,
incredibly charismatic leader.
well, that's why I
I think
stopped.
you tick that box there. Tick that box, Fred.
No, I'd stop after that. Um, but uh, but okay, so go example, think of some techniques then. So yeah, that's probably a bit extreme. But yeah, again, so let's share some. People love practical stuff on podcasts, so let's have
Yeah.
a think
Okay.
about a.
Well, let me talk. Should we talk through the principles first?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay. So, there's a colleague of Cialdini's called Dr. Gregory Neidert. He came up with this core motives of social influence model. And what that does is nicely organize the principles so that when is the best time to use the principles, depending on where you are in your journey with your influencing of your customer or your prospect or whomever. There's three distinct phases. So the first phase is cultivating a positive relationship. Okay. So in that phase, when you're trying, in the very worst case, you're trying to get someone to take your phone calls, trying to get someone to even open or reply to your emails. So this is very kind of foundation stuff. So there's 3 principles that are applicable in that step. So that's liking. Okay. So we tend to say yes to people who we like. Okay. There is also unity, which we discussed just now. And there's also reciprocity.
Yeah.
Okay, so we give back to others when we've received something from them of value. Okay, so that is cultivating a good relationship. Then step 2 in the influencing process is removing uncertainty. So you've built a great rapport and relationship with your prospect. They have some questions. They're uncertain about whether they should move ahead with you or not. So you want to remove that uncertainty. So there's 2 principles of influence that are relevant there. So that's authority, which we've spoken about. So demonstrating that you know what you're talking about, you're the expert in the field, and you're making valid and relevant recommendations to them that can help them. And there's also social proof. Okay. So we follow when we're uncertain, we basically follow what other people are doing. Okay. And the more the better. So that's removing uncertainty, step 2. And then step 3 then is person's got all the information. They are clear on your offering, what you can do for them. Your relationship is great. You actually want them to take action now. So the last step is motivating for action. And the 2 ethical influence principles that we use there is scarcity. Okay, so when things are in short or dwindling supply, we value them more. And then the last one is consistency and commitment. So if people have publicly and voluntarily said they're going to do something in the past, they feel this great internal and external pressure to follow through on that. So those are the 7 principles wrapped up in the NIDAT's core motives model.
Oh, I love that.
You like
I love that. As you were going through, I was kind of trying to check off the principles and seeing if I could guess which ones were going where. And
Oh,
I
you
wasn't
got it.
far off. I wasn't far off. Yeah,
You got it.
that's pretty cool.
You got it.
Yeah. And again, so we've got that as the model to take us through stuff, but we've got to again use this check of is it true? Genuinely, is it scarce? Or are you
Yep.
just making it up? You've actually got a
Yep.
massive warehouse full of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it worth doing?
Is it wise?
And then is it wise?
Yeah.
Wise. And then the other one was, is it naturally occurring?
Yeah. Is that principle that you're bringing into play, is that naturally occurring in that particular instance? So that's your go no go before you
Yeah.
do anything. Okay.
Yeah.
You need to check that.
Okay. So what you're doing in your training, what you're doing with the institute work is helping people to really understand those principles, get down into the sort of detail around them, how you can use them, how you shouldn't use them. And then I suppose you're putting that against their context of, well, you're a buyer, you're a salesperson, you're a teacher, you're
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
trainer. What is these? I use consistency and commitment always. No, what are you taking away? What are your action points?
Yeah.
Put it in chat. Tell
Yeah.
me what it is. Say it out loud.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're
Yeah.
more likely to do it
Exactly.
every
So
time.
when people actively make a commitment, okay, like particularly writing it down. I don't know how it extends to writing in the chat, but when you write it down physically, so that's a big amplifier. When they do so voluntarily, and also when they do it publicly.
Yeah.
So if your sales boss is asking all the key account managers, what target you're going to hit, if you declare that number publicly in front of your peers, you're more likely to feel compelled to deliver on that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking just in training. If I'm working virtually, that's why I'll say
Yeah.
put it in chat.
No, no,
And then
no.
certain.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
So, with the coaching, so what happens is there'll be a cohort of people, and they'll all go through the online ethical influence practitioner program, which is 10 hours of learning. It's presented by Dr. Cialdini himself. There's an exam at the end. You get a certificate and a badge for your LinkedIn profile. And you can also attend, there's 12 live sessions with either Cialdini or the Institute faculty members over the course of the year. So that's the foundation. And then in the coaching, we go through each of the principles in detail, but then we apply it to the client's specific influence challenges. So where are they having difficulties, and bring each of these principles in to see which are the ones that are most relevant, are most likely to yield success. So it's about firstly understanding the principles, understanding when to use them, but how to amplify them for greatest effect, and also how to activate them in the first place. So yeah, the book is great, and you can, as you have done, you've picked up so much from the book itself, but there's lots of hidden gems in the course that aren't available anywhere on the internet and are not available in the books. So it really does take you another level deeper.
I like that. And understanding and amplifying. But I mean, it's the same. I'm sat here on my 2 books behind me, and yeah, I'd love people to go and buy them. You're going to get more if you get engaged into the training and then into the coaching and really starting to take it away and use it. I mean, ultimately, it's implementation, not just the information. That's the thing.
It is. It's application, because that's where it really counts. But you asked for some examples, and I've got an example of when I used the principle of liking in a role that I was in. So let me just give you a little bit of context. So I worked for a company, and I had this title called Head of Relationship. Okay, nothing to do with marriage counseling. I was the interface between procurement and the rest of the business. So that's marketing, finance, operations, everybody else. What they didn't tell me during the interview process was that the entire business hated procurement. Okay, which would have been nice to know. It would be a nice detail to know, frankly.
But you
But
might not have taken the job. Why
yeah,
would they tell you?
exactly. So I spent my first, baptism of fire doesn't really cut it, frankly. So I used to get my backside kicked from marketing, from finance, from whomever it was for months and months. So I had to think, okay, how can I, what can I do here to try and cultivate a positive relationship, clutch something from this terrible situation. So I went on an offensive of building liking. And it's not just about being able to get on with people. That's not what liking is. You have to, there's a few things to you have to provide some value. Okay, sorry, liking and reciprocity. Liking and reciprocity. Let's look at reciprocity. Providing value to someone. So it's not, as we think of, providing a gift, it's not a physical trinket or a branded mug or post-it pad or whatever. There's also intangible gifts that also activate reciprocity. And so I leveraged that. So I was providing, market updates, supplier innovation updates, pricing movements, because it was going to influence their business unit profitability. So I tried to provide as much value as I could to activate reciprocity. From a liking perspective, it's all about, I mean, this is meat and drink to you, Fred. It's finding similarities, finding areas of those common ground outside of business that you can explore together, and you can build up that genuine liking. So liking can't be contrived. You have to like the other person first before they like you back. And so you have to find a way to like that person. Most people have goodness in them. Even the factory manager who wanted to fire me from day one, he had some goodness in him deep down, actually.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, no, I'm scribbling this down here and I'm thinking, okay, from a salesperson point of view, I know that, or certainly in the past, and maybe still today, some salespeople try to sell purely on liking.
Mm.
Hail fellow, well met, and all that good stuff. And it's like, well, no, that's not going to work. There is more to it than just being a good egg.
I mean,
You know,
if you're not liked, then you won't sell. If you are liked, or you have some degree of liking, it's not a guarantee, but you're more likely to make a sale than, if the other person can't stand you.
but there's easy ways for people to do this stuff. I mean, I'm screwing down here, liking plus reciprocity plus authority. If you put out a half intelligent LinkedIn post once a week that customers could read to think, oh, that's useful. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
This person must know their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. You've given me something. I probably should give you something back. You've
Yep.
demonstrated your authority.
Yep.
And if you can put it in a way that actually you come across as being kind of like a normal person, then tick, 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 and just set yourself up for doing that on a regular basis.
Yeah, come across like a normal person is fantastic.
Well,
Yeah,
that's quite hard though.
because we don't bring the whole
Worse.
procurement thing again up, because people are dealing with people, aren't they?
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that I often get is, yeah, okay, these principles, they may work in B2C selling and stuff like that. If you're selling small stuff online, they won't work in my B2B environment. It's, we're much more rational than, your B2C sale, B2C consumers. The fact is that's not the case. So Google and Gartner did a study in 2013, and they found that emotional selling and building that emotional connection with your client was even more important in B2B sales. And the reason for that is that because if you're a consumer just buying products and buying this water bottle, if that water bottle goes wrong, it's not gonna cause me much lasting damage. You're in B2B and you're buying, sales training, or if you're buying you're buying an ERP system for your company. If that goes wrong, that's going to be pretty harmful for your career. So there's a lot more at stake. And that's why it's so important that you can trust the other party you're dealing with. And that's why, selling on emotion is so relevant, and building rapport and using these ethical principles is so important, especially in a B2B world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a misunderstood area. We say emotion, people think it's all a bit soft and fluffy, and it's like, no, I mean, you're talking about risk, essentially. People are going to take a risk to make a decision to go to work with you.
Yeah.
And of course, it's easier just to, we got away with not working with you before. Let's see if we can eke out another year and stick with status quo.
Yeah.
So those things that you're doing, it's a deliberate part of making everything the best possible situation for somebody to buy from you, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, your product or service has to stand up to it, stand up to the test as well. The fact is, without that connection with the person that's doing the buying, then you'll have less success.
Yeah.
Just to demonstrate the irrationality of people, even in hard-nosed areas of business. So there was this investment fund which had the stock ticker Cuba, CUBA. Okay. None of its investments were connected to the country of Cuba. It had no people in Cuba. There was nothing to do with the country of Cuba at all. Yet when the embargoes or the Cuban embargo came in, whenever that was, the stock plummeted. Now, don't try and tell me that financial people are rational based on that example. It just demonstrates, just one example of the irrationality of people. A lot of buyers will say to you that, we're rational. We make decisions on logic alone. It's just simply not true.
Yeah. I think, talking about that, I think I read somewhere that when England are doing well at the cricket, the stock market goes up. That might not be true at all, but it's one of these silly things that sticks in my head.
They're not playing at the moment. We've had a stock market bounce. Maybe they should carry on not
Yeah,
playing.
go on, let's get some games in. Oh, so cool. There are so many elements. We could really go into all of these
It's
parts,
fascinating.
all of these things, and sort of pick them apart and find ways in which salespeople could take that away and just do something a little bit different. But that'll start to stack up, won't it? Those little things that you could do, that one post a week, that little piece of information that you just share with somebody else, those
Yeah,
things
yeah,
can
and
can
sharing.
make a huge difference.
Yeah, and sharing information. For example, with your potential prospects that you're in the early days of engagement with. Yeah, if you've got any relevant kind of information that you have on their industry or on their particular challenges they're facing, send it to them. Obviously, send it to them. Provide value. And with reciprocity, don't give something with the expectation of it being returned. Just give freely, and it will come back to you eventually, for sure.
Yeah. Put it in a video. So it's you saying it. So the authority is you. So all
Easy,
these things we can just take little tweaks that suddenly click, click, click. These things are coming into play, and you're in a better position as a result.
even better. I
So
mean, that's one thing that I learned as well is just because we always resort to email, and we get a million emails a day. So that's not the best way of trying to break through to your prospect. Video, phone call or video call as we're having now, better. A personal recorded message that's customized, fantastic.
yeah, wrap it up in a story, because in a story people can relate back to themselves better. So you'll start to hit the unit. Oh, all of these things we can weave in very much. Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. I said we could go on and on and
I
on
know, I
and on
really
with this,
enjoyed it.
but
I love it. I love it. I love it. I could talk all
but
day.
where can people get in touch with you then? Because so you're all over this stuff, and that is what you are now training and putting real effort into this. Where can people get in touch if they want to know a
Yeah,
bit
so
more?
they can find me on LinkedIn. So I'm Martin John on LinkedIn, and then on my website, which is martinjohn-training.com.
Brilliant. We will pop both of those links into the show notes so people can find those
Thank you so
really
much.
easy. But no, thank you so much for coming along and sharing those.
I've really enjoyed it, Fred.
Really, really useful stuff, which I hope people will take away and just start to use a little bit.
Fabulous. Been a pleasure, as always.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.